Welcome all of you to Basics of a Capital Campaign. I'm glad we've had a moment to get to know each other a little bit and speak, but I am going to take over the reins now and explain the process, our three phases for the process for a capital campaign. What we'll cover tonight is ECF's mission, how to know if you're ready for a capital campaign, the overview of the campaign process, and where the consultant fits into this. Do you need a consultant or can you do it on your own? First off, I want to talk to you a little bit about ECF. Many of you have been on many webinars of ours, so you know that that is one of the areas that we focus on at ECF, but we have our own mission and our own mission visions and mission statement, just as you all try to do. So ECF is really in the business of strengthening the leadership and financial capabilities of Episcopal congregations, dioceses, and communities of faith to pursue their mission and ministry. And we do that through areas of finance with capital campaigns, endowments, planned giving, annual fund help, as well as our leadership resources, and that is where ECF Vital Practices comes in and our Fellows Program. I'm going to start out just talking a little bit about the basic areas, three areas of fundraising, where we get funds and resources for ministry. We have annual stewardship or annual giving. That is usually the fall. It's that one time when we're asking our parishioners or our supporters for pledges to fund our annual needs. Capital campaigns are capital giving or extraordinary giving at times like when you need to repave your driveway or put on a new roof. Churches, camps, dioceses also have these extraordinary needs. So you enter into this maybe 5 to 8 to 10 years. Every so often you're going to need to do that in addition to your annual giving. And again, planned giving is that end-of-life giving and something that we really need to get back to looking at and concentrating on, because these old churches that were built with beautiful stone and lots of money, those people knew that the church was in their will. We're trying to encourage churches to do a better job of getting people to remember the church in their will. So that is planned giving, which we help with also. The least visible parts of the process are the most important, which is true of so many things. This is a fundraising process for all of these things. So this is something just to keep in mind overall, whether you're doing a small fundraising project or a large capital campaign. You need to identify the need. You need to identify potential donors, to communicate the vision, and ask for support. Usually the number one reason we don't get support is because we don't ask. People are waiting for us to ask. Once you get that support, you need to say thank you. We will talk about that later. And continue the process. On an annual basis with your annual fund, this is a continual process. So once we get used to this cycle, this becomes a year-round process. A successful campaign, and this is directly relatable to our ECF methodology, is in three phases. Often a for-profit fundraiser will talk about feasibility study. Often we get people calling us saying, we're ready for a feasibility study, can we do that? We feel that the most important process is the process of discernment. I have a client now who has renamed that because discernment is so often used with times when a frustration, even though it's a great word, they're calling it their discovery phase. So this is a time when all of your ideas, your visioning, getting people involved, the planning, the communication, you're getting out of committee phase at this point and really getting into discerning where you're going. The feasibility study measures things in a more formal way, in a more detailed way, and gives you a report, really specific information back that is written in a report. And finally, the ask, the solicitation process, is the final invitation for people to participate in this exciting ministry that they've identified and are a part of. We have question slides. I would love it if you all, as questions arise when I'm speaking, could type into the chat. Terry's going to help me look at that. So we have no questions so far. I don't want to wait on the slide here, but feel free at any time if there's something I say or you want me to repeat, please type into the chat at the bottom page there. So I'm going to talk more in detail now about the first phase, discernment or discovery. You'll find out in these next slides really how much this does take. This is the biggest part of the presentation tonight, is discernment. If you do discernment correctly and wholeheartedly, you will lay the ground for a successful capital campaign. Just as with everything. So the first thing, the first reason you are doing discernment is to create ownership and involvement. Often you have a devoted group of volunteers who have spent months, maybe years, gathering information on deferred maintenance, dreaming about new additions, buildings, that sort of thing. This is the time it gets out of committee and into the pews, and you start listening to what everybody has to say. Terry, my colleague behind the scenes tonight, loves to say, unless the vestry is willing to write a check that's going to cover everything you need, we need to talk to all the people about this. And you want ultimately, in the end, for it to be their idea. So you need to identify the needs. You want to connect those needs to your mission. You need to involve leaders and stakeholders and communicate the vision. So let's talk about those a little bit more specifically. Identifying the needs. What is the campaign for? Why are we doing this? Isn't our crumbling building just as good as it always has been? Building projects. This can be a new building. Maybe you are growing out of your pews and you really need to expand. Maybe you were a startup church and you want your own building or need an additional building at this point. Program needs can be funded if you need seed money. Most of your programs, however, should be funded by your annual campaign. But this may be a startup that you're looking for that people would really like to give extraordinary funds to. You can raise money for an endowment, again, if you are relating it back to the mission and ministry of the church. And we get many, many calls recently for debt retirement. And that is similar to the endowment. What is it that you could free up from your annual funding for mission if you didn't have debt? So none of the things we talk about, you just talk about buildings and money. It is always, always linked to mission and ministry. So the other question is, what is God calling you to do or become today? Unfortunately, we don't get to just listen to this question once and sit back and be comfortable. So this is where your ongoing mission, reevaluation, engagement with the congregation happens. What are you called to do? How will these projects help us do it better, be more faithfully? This is also the time to ask, what have we been doing all along for years and years that is kind of worn its way, it's had its day and has lost energy. And what is it that the congregation today really gets energy about? There's quite a few things that we continue to do because we're Episcopal churches and we think we should. This is a time for everything to be in question and to really dream about the future. And then what is God calling you to do or become? So this is also for the individual. So we have group discussions and we have individual discussions. That's how much we're talking about engaging people. We want to involve leaders. We want to involve stakeholders. If you have people who you know would really like to be making a large gift to the congregation, this is the time to engage them. But you're engaging every potential giver because you never know what is going to stir them. And if you're involved in conversation, you will start to understand that and it will emerge. So this starts with forming a committee, deciding the strategies around how we're going to do this. You may decide small group meetings are the way to go so that the people who are a little bit more reluctant to talk in a large room full of your entire congregation, they may feel freer to talk to 8 people gathered for a while. These are individual meetings. If you have people who you think have a particular interest in this, this is the time to contact them, not when you're asking for money. This is the engagement and invitation. And this is also the time to consult professionals. So this is when you start looking for capital campaign consultants. And we had somebody here tonight said, we're getting our ducks in a row. I sort of jokingly said, we're one of your ducks. Talk to us sooner than later. We can help you through this time and give you some tools to do the engagement with the congregation correctly and openly before you get to a feasibility study, where often you will hear from people, where did this come from? Nobody asked me. I haven't been able to participate this. You want to continue communicating. We will say this constantly, and this is not just for discernment, but all 3 phases. It is communicate, communicate, communicate. It is one of those words, but especially today when we have so many pressures on getting our attention. I don't think I have to explain it. The fact that you're even here listening to this for an hour is a coup in our day and age that you would like to participate in something other than a tweet. So, whoops, didn't mean to change that. So you want ongoing communication. So you have meetings. You need to communicate what happened in those talks back to people. You have a change of plans. Those need to be shared again and again with the congregation. Something came out of meetings or talking to somebody that was a great idea, and now you're thinking about changing something up. Communicate. And we have multiple ways of doing that today, and we should be doing that today over the internet. That's where your Twitter, if you have that sort of a congregation that is doing that, tweets, social media, bulletins, announcements, skywriting, if you have access to that, I think would be fabulous. Finally, once you have really talked about this with the community, your final plans are approved by vestry, meaning here are the things that came up. We have the costs. We have some drawings, some sketches, maybe not down to the exact likeliness, but this is where you may test some other things at this point. You may say, you know what, we can only raise $300,000. There's no way we can raise more. You might want to test some projects that really are in the hearts of the people to see what people think. Because you're just in the early stages. You can put that into your feasibility study to get feedback from people as far as where their priorities are. Before I start talking about feasibility study, I wanted to make sure there are no questions about discernment. I do see that there's a question talking about how helpful is it to ask for capital for building issues on a yearly basis. This is a good question. There are a couple of ways to look at this. If you have a capital fund, meaning you have money set aside, or your vestry has said every year a certain percentage, 5% of our annual intake, of our annual pledges are going to go into a fund to fund building needs. That's a fabulous way to do that. Most churches these days are not in the situation where they can skim that part off and think so far out. Asking for capital building issues on a yearly basis, in addition to people's annual pledge, can get tiresome. And people are not sure why they are pledging annually and also are being henpecked or bothered for constant projects. So you don't want to say, okay, this year we're going to do the roof project. We want you to fill out a pledge card, and then we're going to come back and ask you for an additional amount of money to put toward the roof. And next year we're going to do the boiler. This gets really tiresome, and it doesn't enable you to have the real visioning together, focusing conversation on if we need a new boiler, if we need a new roof, if this church disappeared or we didn't have a roof, what would it matter? And that's where you need to engage people. They really don't want to just fund the roof. If you're talking about what goes on under the roof, that's a different story. I'm going to move on to feasibility study now. Please, again, type in any questions if you have them. The feasibility study really is a more formal tabulation of your discernment. Often people say, well, why don't we just have a feasibility study, find out how much people are going to give us, and then we'll figure out what we're going to do. You do not want to waste the money or the time on a feasibility study to find out that people are mad that they haven't been consulted, or confused about why they need a capital campaign, or feel we're being frivolous, because that doesn't give you the information to move forward. Those are the questions you want to ask in discernment. You will still have some of those comments, obviously, in a feasibility study, but you want people willing, ready, and excited to fill out a survey and really able to give you an idea of how much they would be willing or capable of committing to the campaign. So, what does a feasibility study do? It ensures that your campaign will be a success. This is one of the most important reasons to do a feasibility study. Not only does it measure the awareness and support, you're going to find out if you did your discernment correctly. If we ask questions, were you aware that the church was considering a capital campaign? Were you aware of the needs? You want people to say yes. That shows that people were listening and you were communicating adequately. But most important, it identifies an attainable goal. ECF will come back to you with an amount that what we consider the goal for your campaign should be. So you may test for $1 million worth of projects. You got together everything that the church would love to do if money were falling from the sky is $1 million worth of projects. And your feasibility study comes back and says you can raise $750,000. We want you to then go back to the drawing board and figure out, with the help of the feasibility study, because you will also have asked people to prioritize the projects, what they think is the most important thing now. And leadership then goes back and identifies what they will do for $750,000. So this is your this is your promise to your donors. You want to say, we can raise $750, and if we do, we will do A, B, C, and D. So what about the other option? We've decided that we need $1 million to do this project. And we're going to pray for this, and God will be good, and we will raise $1 million. That might be fine for a hospital or a school. If you then, as a congregation, raise $750,000, you have a failed campaign. And that's sad, because you have raised $750,000, and now everybody is disappointed. So you want it to be attainable. If you have to raise $1 million, if this is a new build, then the discussion of funding and financing should be involved in your campaign. You'll also find out volunteers, who is willing to volunteer. There's a question for that. It prioritizes projects, and it weighs some intangibles that may affect your campaign if there are other campaigns going on. If there's something in your DNA from 2 decades ago that's still hanging on with a good number of people, that's good information to have at that point. So how long does it take? Unlike Discernment, which is not very undefined, but it is the one stage that varies from church to church, depending on how far we've gotten, how much pre-talk has gone on. If you've been working for 5 years with an architect, it's going to be a little bit easier to do discernment than if you come to us and say, we're not sure what we want to do, we really want to engage the congregation. Feasibility study is very organized. We do that in a 3-month process. We design and print the tentative case statement and survey, so this is a very straightforward list of projects and costs and how they link to the parish and how it will improve and affect your mission and ministries. We survey the entire congregation, every person, if they are willing, by conducting personal interviews and sending out electronic and mail surveys. We compile and analyze the results into a comprehensive report. You find out, you are told everything that people say, all of the comments, not with names attributed, of course, but it's very interesting to see all of the thought and really deep thinking and what everybody is thinking and taking the time to write in these surveys. The consultant then comes back with recommendations. Including in that is the amount of the campaign goal that we think you should raise. And 92% of our clients meet or exceed the recommended goal. I'm going to read a couple of we have a couple of long questions here. How defined should a building plan be developed? We have a concept plan with 3 different space utilizations. I might have to get back to that in a little bit because that's a very specific question. I want you to know that any of these questions, if we run out of time or they're very specific to your campaign, we would love to have an email conversation with you and talk to you more about that. Somebody else has written, we just completed a search and clergy transition. Much of the work supports the need for upgraded facilities. Should we wait for things to settle? This is a really interesting scenario that ECF is being faced with more and more. On the one hand, we love and we enforce, and it is our mission to strengthen lay leadership. And there's no stronger message that you have engaged and strong lay leadership if they can run a capital campaign, if you can decide the mission and ministry, and without your permanent rector, maybe with an interim, and go ahead and do a capital campaign and then really attract clergy saying, this is where we're going, this is where we're headed, we would love for you to think about it and come on board with us. I can't imagine there are two men. My husband is an Episcopal priest as well. I think he would love if he came on board right after a capital campaign and the church had a defined vision, knew where they were going, and he didn't have to get involved in the fundraising. So again, that's a case-by-case basis, but it is not out of the question. I think the first question, too, is how defined should a building plan be? So I think I'd like to speak to that. Often, I think churches get into trouble when a small committee has decided, has engaged, or even the vestry has engaged an architect and designed an entire building or wing or renovations and said, okay, we're doing a capital campaign. Now we need to raise money to do this. And there has been no input from the congregation at large. This is where you have to trust that you have some smart people in your pews. And they have some really very good ideas about where bathrooms should be, or what might work better for the choir. And the people who are cooking those pancake fundraisers in the kitchen, did we talk to them about where things are in the kitchen? So the point of having things completely finalized, I think, is a mistake before you're talking to the congregation. And if you're talking about a new build, that really is a tiered, constant involvement. You get feedback, you make some changes. You get some more feedback and make some changes. This is a nightmare scenario, and I know for those of you who are involved with committees and have been for years, there is nothing worse than inviting more people into your process. I get that. But if you're going to ask them to fund it, you have to do that. So there is a medium between sharing and really asking for feedback and continuing on and not getting bogged down. I hope that answers that question a little bit as to what we were. Do you recommend hiring an outside consultant to do feasibility study? I am going to get to that in general, but yes, I do. If for the fees, for the fees, this seems extraordinary, and I wouldn't just put your question to feasibility study. I think that could be applied to all three phases. I think churches that are looking at their expenditures and their tight budgets for annual needs look at paying fees for a capital campaign and think, no way, we do not have, if we raise that money, we need that money. Look what we could do with $20,000. The thing is, you will not raise the amount of money that you can. I'm going to talk on the last slide about hiring a consultant, so I'm hoping that will also answer your question. When you finally get to the capital campaign phase, the solicitation phase, you are now hopefully have people chomping at the bit to write you a check. Often I have people saying, can we just get on with it? And that's exactly where you want people to be. You have the preparation and planning of materials. This is the first step. You now know where you're headed. You have the goal. You know how much you want to raise. You know the plans. You may have gotten even more specific plans or drawings, which is fine. More specific, tightly, you really want to be as specific and close to the real numbers as possible. I have heard over and over again, do not depend on an architect for real numbers. Architects are fabulous. They can help you through a lot of discernment, and really some good ones are engaging congregations in these conversations. As far as real costs for permits and construction, you need to talk to somebody who knows about that. We need to recruit leaders. You've involved quite a few volunteers up to this point, but nothing overwhelming, a couple of people maybe. At this point, you're talking about 20 to 30% of your congregation you're going to want to recruit to make peer-to-peer asks. And I have never been in a room of people with their hands raised, eager to volunteer to ask people for money. But this often winds up being the most rewarding time for volunteers and their engagement with their peers, with people that they've gone to church with for years but never engaged in a deeper conversation. So this process is really about relationship and greeting people and inviting them to participate in this incredible project that you all have been working on. And again, if we've done it right, the people who you're calling on will not be surprised. They will be eager to talk to you about it. We do this in a pretty typical way to most capital campaigns. Our quiet phase, we call an advanced gift phase. This is often made up with, and usually made up with the people who have been on committees. This is your vestry. These are people who have volunteered to make asks, to be gift workers. That often covers the people who are going to be making your largest gifts. So whereas in a library campaign, you may have to look at your top donors, and those are the people you're going to. You still want to do the same thing in a church campaign, where you're going to see who is it that has been really committed to this place financially in the past. You will already have engaged with them in discernment, but now you're going to go to them and ask them, is it possible for them to make a leading gift? Again, those people are usually already in your leadership list, who, whether they give $10 or $1 million, the people asking and the people in the vestry are going to be in that advanced gift group. Then we have a kickoff event. This has been a long time coming. When I tell people your kickoff event really comes at kind of the end of your campaign, the kickoff event is the celebration where you're done with your advanced gifts. You have a special dinner, dance, celebration, and you announce that you are 60 to 70% to your goal with leadership gifts. To some people, this seems counterintuitive, and it did to me for a while. Well, if we announce that we have all this money already, aren't people going to say, well, I don't have to give? It actually has the opposite effect. People want to be a part of this. They see it's going to work. Often people are hanging back saying, well, I'll see. They think they can raise this money. I really doubt it. And once you have this event and they see, wow, we are almost 3/4 of the way to our goal, I want to be a part of that. The train is leaving the station. So that's the background on that. And then the kickoff event involves celebration and thanks, but that is the end of your campaign as well. Celebration and thanks. And you cannot thank enough. This is an example of the materials that we produce for you. I had talked about the 3 different phases of the campaign. The first, the discernment, is a contract that ranges, on what we call a daily rate. There are 3 separate campaign phases and 3 separate contracts. I tell people you do not have to sign up from the beginning to the end. If you get through discernment and you think it sounds like it's not the right time to do a capital campaign, then you are done. That's it. You don't have to go on. If you say, well, yes, we're ready for a feasibility study, the feasibility study comes back and shows some real snares and something that you need to get back to the drawing board for, you don't move on to campaign phase, just so you know that. Our feasibility studies and our campaigns are an all-inclusive fee. So the slide I'm showing you now with, this is a folded brochure, and we design them with your pictures, your plans, a prayer that is written by a committee. Here inside we have the plans. This is the explanation with the costs. It's a little less detailed than your case statement that goes with the feasibility study. But this is really the long, hard work of the entire congregation. And I love seeing these when they come to a client and they first open them, because it's like Christmas morning. You open these and you want to give them to your neighbor and say, look at the amazing things that are going on in my church. And I'm not sure everybody thinks that before they get started on a capital campaign. So just wanted to show this to you here. We also do a giving chart, which is very hard to see, but that breaks things down for people easily to say, if I was to give a gift of $25,000 over 3 years, this is what that would look like on a monthly basis. So some of that easy math has been, or not so easy math has been done for you. I have a couple of questions I'd like to look at before going on. A congregation with urgent structural needs, should we follow the same process even though we have immediate urgent needs? Well, there's a couple ways to look at that too. If your roof is falling in and people are going to get hurt, that is something you need to take into account. So this often comes up. What I'd love to say is their immediate urgent needs that have been pretty urgent for quite a while, but something happened to make them immediate at this point. And that is the reality of our deferred maintenance and really balancing our budgets on the backs of our buildings. I had a client where a stone actually fell from the ceiling, and luckily nobody was sitting in the pew that day. But boy, what a way to get a congregation's attention with that. They had to tape off those pews for almost 2 years. They took care of some real safety needs, but then pulled back. And they did an entire building exploration. They looked at the cost of selling the building, tearing the building down, fixing the building. There's a lot to look at. So again, this is a case-by-case basis. This is every church comes to us with different needs, but this would be something. And I also had another client who got hit by natural disasters, Hurricane Irene, and they kept getting hit by these disasters. So church insurance was helping a little bit, but it really kept stacking up over time. Excuse me. The actual needs for these guys. So there were things that they knew they had to take care of and finance. So if it is that immediate, you can do the work. Don't do the good stuff that doesn't have to be done right away. But you can do that work, and then that is part of your campaign to fund, either repay the endowment, either to repay the debt that you needed to take care of this, if the roof was caving in, if you had to shore up a wall, then you can do it that way. But you don't want to, this is definitely a good question and assigned to everyone. Don't wait until this is an immediate disaster. And then there's another question about what about involving people nearby a historic church or people whose parents were involved years ago. The first part is I think you're talking about neighbors of a church that benefits the church benefits either property values or people just love the fact that they live near this historic, beautiful church on the green. What I tell people is, do you know how many beautiful historic churches, Episcopal churches, we have in this country on greens that people like living near? But have you also contributed to the Congregational church down the street that's also beautiful and enhances your neighborhood? You can certainly reach out to them. If you have mission that people take advantage of, you can reach out to them and ask them to participate. It's not where your big donors are going to come from, and it's not going to make your capital campaign. But certainly, it's worth a try. And then also in that is people whose parents were involved years ago. I call those alumni. And that's always the cleanup, really the final tier. People who were married in the church, people who have extended families in the church, people who have brought their kids to be baptized and never seen again, and then they come for the baptism of the next child. I would certainly write them a letter. It's usually a written plea unless you have some sort of connection or somebody in the church who can make a call. You will usually get a one-time gift. Somebody will write a check for $100 and say, you know, you're always in my heart, you're a special place. Very unusual for that as well to make or break your campaign. Thank you for the questions. So if you have done all of your stages of the capital campaign correctly and wisely listened to your consultant, you may also be like Moses in his situation. In Exodus 36, finally the workmen all left their task to meet with Moses and told him, we have more than enough materials on hand now to complete the job. So Moses sent a message throughout the camp announcing that no more donations were needed. Then at last the people were restrained from bringing more. And that is our greatest maybe fantasy, maybe hope, that if we do this right and we engage people in the mission, they are going to be so compelled to be a part of it that we're going to have to ask them to stop because we haven't figured out what to do with all this money. This is great. Any more questions at this point? We do have some time. I'm going to move on. I think we'll type some questions in here, but I wanted to get to this slide that talks about hiring a consultant, and since this question was brought up earlier. Do you need a consultant? That is the big question, and I am not saying that it is insignificant funds to go ahead and get a consultant. But if you want to have a successful campaign, meet your goal, define your goal, and come out the other end as a healthier place, I would say yes, whether it's ECF or somebody else. I do not recommend going it alone. I liken this, I know, rather dramatically to operating on your family. But if you think about it, and I have met some volunteers, some parishioners who have fundraising experience, who have considered doing a campaign with the congregation, and I asked them, I said, so are you ready to want to leave this congregation when you're done? It's very hard to love and be the positive voice to your peers. It's just difficult. Our job is to keep people accountable, keep a timeline that people want to stick to, but you're dealing with volunteers. Our job is to advise and keep people moving. We're neutral. I do interviews with parishioners all the time that I know somebody in the congregation could not do. It would just make them nuts. It's not my church. I listen to people, and often that is the thing that they want. It's confidential, so people will tell me things they wouldn't tell a parishioner if they were running it. And we have the experience. A consultant does more capital campaigns than 100 years of the life of a church. So we're on the, we really hear back from our own consultants what is going on in the field, what's happening, what's new, what's working that used to work that's not working now. You do have a higher goal potential. If you want to think of it just as far as money, think about it. The third phase of a capital campaign, your volunteers are tired. They are ready for this to be done. They're ready for the construction to start and the celebration to start. Do they really want to do the cleanup and the final calls to people to reach the goal? No. That is why we are here, to say you are almost there. Let's finish this strategy to get you to goal. We do know that the ethical standards, we are held to them. We also can keep your clergy focused. I'm not saying it, not pointing any fingers here, but we can keep clergy focused on what they need to be focused on, which is ministry. You might want to say you're doing it on your own. If you do it on your own, it's putting a huge burden on clergy to keep volunteers accountable, even if you go to the lengths, every length possible to make it a lay-led project. We have a couple more questions here. Is there a typical percentage cost for a consultant? It is actually unethical for anyone to tell you that they will be your consultant for a percentage of what you raise. In ethical standards say that's a no-no. You should be paying for services and for experience and for advice, but to base your service on a percentage of what a church could bring in is not ethical in fundraising standards. Is a feasibility study required, especially if you're not doing a major building campaign? Again, if you know exactly how much you can raise and you know exactly what people feel about the projects, rarely, I would say a major building campaign is not the norm for the campaigns that we do. They are usually mixed in with maybe accessibility. There could be partial debt repayment. If you don't do a feasibility study, you are really putting an awful lot of confidence in your leadership knowing exactly what people are thinking. What's your experience securing grant and foundation funds? Often people think there are funds out there and grants available, and if we only find them, that will solve our problems with buildings. And they are there depending on where you live, and they are there depending on the bandwidth of your volunteers. If you have some people in your pews who know where to go and who to talk to and how to write a grant, that is a definite area to go to. I'm working with one client now actually in Massachusetts, and they're getting quite a few grants locally. Not going to be the majority. It's going to get them, they have an $800,000 goal for their congregation and another goal of $195,000 from, I think, 4 grants. So again, it is not going to be the meat of your capital campaign, but you should always look into it, and they are there. I'm reading another question about fees for consultants. I think I answered that. that someone is trying to organize and lead a campaign without the expertise and experience and the outside. Okay, hold on, I want to read this comment. Trying to organize and lead a campaign without the expertise and experience and outside eyes while maintaining the same level of investment in the parish as clergy and laity simply does not make sense. A consultant is essential. And David Perkins wrote that. I didn't make that up. Thank you, David. Couldn't have said it better. But, it makes a lot of sense. The other thing about that is if you mess this up, and it does not need to be really messed up. I have dealt with churches where there is something that has irked people for 10 years, and I finally find out that what it was, and it was that they didn't finish one project that they had said they were going to finish. So it goes straight into your church DNA if there's any thought of mishandling funds. I mean, that's not even at the top of the list. If people were not given the opportunity to weigh in, if somebody's feelings get hurt, this can really, really sit in your, and I know you all know what I'm talking about. It can stick around for years to come. Okay, so I've told you why hire a consultant at all. I have to tell you why to call us at ECF. We have the knowledge, obviously, of the Episcopal Church. The Episcopal Church and church in general is changing at an amazing rate right now. We used to move like snails, and I would say in the last 2 years, all of a sudden, things are taking off. Churches are deciding they want to define their mission and ministry. They need to get off the dime now. We have over 25 years of successful campaign management. We approach fundraising spiritually. And I think this is a big, big piece of this. We want you to have a spiritual committee. And this is a group of people or one person who really brings us back and reminds us why we're doing this. And we approach this from the beginning. If you're a church that has no mission and no desire to be a church, it's just that it's always been standing there and that's all we care about, honestly, there's probably no use for a capital campaign, and we will talk to you and ask you the tough questions about that. So it's not just fundraising, and we're not there just to get our fees and get out. Again, our mission is to empower you for the future. We are in the same boat with you. If that doesn't happen, ECF goes away. We implement it holistically. We want to build up your leadership. We want to have you set up with a planned giving program at the end of this. We want your annual fundraising to be more spiritual, more engaged, and more annual, year-round. We have a national network of consultants, so they're placed, we live all over the country. I'm, again, in New Hampshire near Portsmouth. I have clients all over, but I deal mostly in the Northeast. But again, regionally, it's important that you have the right consultant. And that may not be the consultant next door, but it may be a consultant who used to live nearby. And our sliding fee scales. I know a lot of you were talking about fees. We have a sliding fee scale so that the smallest church can have a capital campaign. I believe we've done campaigns maybe for less than this, but $160,000. And we have service packages that can be appropriate for a church that size. You obviously don't need the amount of time from a consultant or many other things, but we want to be able to offer you the services that you need. We have an endowment question I think we can answer quickly. Are there rules of thumb for how much endowments churches should hold? So for how much endowments churches should hold. ECF Our dream would be for every church to have an endowment. And there are many sides to this coin, certainly more than two. But you need something to fall back on. You need that rainy day fund. This is why we find ourselves in some really serious situations. The way an endowment is structured is very important. The way a community or congregation views that endowment, the way a vestry feels about their power or the way they should use that. So we also work very closely with churches to make sure that their endowment structures are up and running in public and being looked at. We manage endowments in pooled funds with State Street, and would be happy to talk to anybody who has questions about endowments. You can really just call ECF and talk to our endowment person, but that is another piece of what we would work with you on with the capital campaign. But there's not a rule of thumb for how much. I wish there were, but we'd love for you all to have one. So here's a list of some capital campaign resources. If you go to our website, you can find how to prepare for a capital campaign. I really prefer the Follow Me brochure, which gives you a really nice summary of the 3 phases of a campaign, and there's some sample client materials and related reading. If you have not heard of or picked up a copy of The Spirituality of Fundraising by Henry Nouwen, you need to order that now when you get off of this webinar. It is written for us in the most amazing way, and only the way Henry Nouwen can write. It's a small book. I would quote the entire book to you right now if we had time. But anybody out there who would like to get it as a gift for your board members or your vestries or your stewardship chair, it's a fabulous, fabulous gift. And Not Your Parents' Offering Plate is a great read as well, letting us know that things are changing and the church needs to change with it. Right here is your contact information, so please feel free to contact us. ECF's direct number is at the bottom, and if you're not sure who to contact, if you need endowment help, plan giving, anything like that, please give them a call. I work directly with Terry and Louise. We are the capital campaign team, so we're New York, San Diego, and New Hampshire, and we would all love to hear from you. If you have questions we didn't get to, we are at 8 o'clock, 5 o'clock, 3 o'clock, depending on where you live. The time is up and I want to stick to our hour. But if you do have questions, please contact us. We'd love to have more of a conversation about the specifics of your situation. Join us again. Thanks.